So we're back again for another episode of the Comic Book Crowd, and here we are.
What's up, fellas? Hello.
So we have to my, whatever it is, right to my right, I have Matt Woods. Down in that direction over there, we have Alan of Climate Comics, and below me, that's the easy one, I have Wayne Squirrel Menace Comics.
Hey,
so
everyone.
we're not all here. We're not all here. So who are we missing? Let's see. Who are we missing?
Who is that
remember
guy?
Madam Blaster.
Anybody remember?
Madam Blaster.
Madam Blaster.
Madam
Oh,
Blaster.
Madam
The most
Blaster.
important one.
There's
Yes.
another guy that hangs out with
Guest
her.
host on every now and then.
Yeah, somebody else hangs out with her, right? That guy, whatever his name is. Yeah.
Yeah,
I can't remember.
Yeah, whatever. So they had some family or some other stuff to do. So as a practical matter, we're going to probably have to have somebody take his place. Let's see who's here first. All right. So, hey, first of all, let's put Chuck on. Chuck says Peacemaker rocks. So there, Reggie collects. You know, there's a few of us that do like that show, right? Which
I
is
like
very
it,
good. Yeah. And we have Phil. Phil is here. Hey, Phil. Thanks for coming by. Right. Brian. Yeah, Brian is here. That's good, too. So we're here. So we got a few people here. Some more will probably join us as we go along. So who do we have that's going to take Madam Blaster and that other guy's place tonight? You know, well, let's see if we can give him a proper introduction. Okay, hold on.
All the Gibbon gang say he pretty fly for a Filipino guy. Has some cool comics. Now any will suffice. If the shop doesn't have them, eBay will be nice. Now ears LC as he passes comics that he sees. But if he looks twice, there's a grail that he needs. Ladies and gentlemen, pretty fly for a Filipino guy.
Where is he?
Whoa.
There he is. Pretty fly for a Filipino guy is taking Madam Blaster and that other guy's place for tonight. How you doing, Lenny?
Pretty good, sir. How you doing?
That's good.
How you doing, as you guys say in New York?
Hey, we're
How
doing
you
good
doing?
here. We're doing good here. Let's get the rest of the
Hey,
gang
bada
in
bing.
here. Yeah.
I was digging that tune.
Well, let me tell you something. When I first asked Pretty Fly to come and join me on the Monday show on, with the top comic book cover, because he kept on telling me, here's a great cover. Here's a great cover. So I said, why don't you come on? And he said first, no. Then he said, I don't show myself, and so he still doesn't show himself for that. So I'm happy he's on this thing. But I told him, I said, where'd you get that name from? And he told me about, what was the name of the group again? Like the name of the group?
Offspring?
Yeah, right. And they had this song. So I looked
Yeah,
it
right.
up. I looked it up and I saw the song.
You know
and it's a
Offspring.
pretty
You're
good
a
song.
hit.
Yes, I do. We
And
all
the
do.
video was good too. So I
It was
said,
great.
I made this together for him, and I said, why don't I show this the first time you come on? And you remember what you told me?
No, I don't.
He told me, that's better than anything I could do. Please don't show that, because then my video is going to look really bad.
Aw.
But you were wrong, because your videos on the Monday show are just really terrific. They're
great.
really, really
They are
terrific.
great.
So, we're really happy that you're on there, and I hope you get on again soon. So, today's topic is something that I was just thinking about a little bit, because with the TV shows that are on, both on Disney Plus, HBO, Max, the CW, I find myself watching just about all of those shows, right? And, comic books are really the source material and what's there. Then the Spider-Man movie comes out, No Way Home. And it racks up over like $1 billion worldwide, and I don't know how much in the US. And I just started thinking to myself, you know what? A lot of times I'll watch a lot of these TV shows or movies, but I don't read the comic books for these particular individuals, like I don't read Thor, but I go to see the Thor movie, right? The Avengers. If you watched my 5 things that DC got right in 2021, I explained why I'm pretty much a DC person now and not a Marvel person. But I watch all the Marvel movies, all the Marvel TV shows, and I really enjoy them. So I'm thinking to myself, well, what does that mean for comic books? So I figured I'd ask the guys, and they said, yeah, let's talk about it. So let's talk about it. What do you guys think?
Movies? Who goes to see movies nowadays? Except half of America. I mean, Spider-Man is just blowing the door open on all these records. So, without a doubt, that's just bringing people into the comic book, genre world, if you will. But I remember growing up, and comic book collectors weren't necessarily looked at as the cool kids in the school, okay?
Right.
These movies, and because they are so well done, they're so popular, they are the cool kids now, the comic book collectors, the people that follow these characters. These movies have really done a big transformation in society in the last 20 years of what is considered, a niche and what is considered cool in today's age.
Matt.
Yeah,
Matt,
go ahead, pretty fly.
I was always cool. So just
without a doubt, I remember you in high
pretty
school.
fly
You
for
were
Pete's
part of
sake.
the bully
Speak for
crowd.
yourself.
You were always picking
talk
on
about
people
me.
and giving people wedgies. I guess that made you cool.
yeah. I matured to fly. I was cool back then. Now I matured to fly. So,
Pretty fly.
Get it out
Is
there.
it like extremely fly or just pretty fly?
just pretty fly. I don't try too hard. Okay.
And his son is Little Fly.
Yeah.
Now, right?
There you go.
He's a little warm right now.
Yeah. He made his YouTube debut on the last time you were on the
I know.
top comic.
I know.
Oh
book.
yeah.
I think half the likes was because of him on the video.
We had a lot of likes on that show. That's true. We did have a lot of likes on that show. So, but Matt,
Uh-oh.
Oh, so yeah, I guess Joe is having a little bit of a technical difficulty right now. But I guess what he was gonna say.
the
Oh,
issue.
he's back.
Yeah, I'm coming back. So if I blink out, just go ahead, guys. I have a bad internet connection here, but so I might blink out on this thing, but the conversation will continue. But my point is, you're right with respect to that. There are people that are now kind of cool. You go to comics, you go to a store, you don't have many kids in there unless they're there with their parents. It's all guys, and you have the movies and all of this type of stuff.
But I'm going to throw something onto that previous conversation about how the movies are changing perception. Guys, comics and literature have always driven movies. Like, that's where the source material comes from. And what are comic books? It's just modern day American literature, but it's done in a graphic format. So, but you've always had TV shows about Buck Rogers and Superman and Batman. They go back into the 40s, with different venues of going on to television. Some of it small screen, some of it big screen. But comics, in a way, have been pushing Hollywood for years and years. And even if Hollywood didn't take the source material word for word from a comic book, a lot of these stories were pretty much adapted, right from the comic books. They just didn't want to pay their royalties. Is that the Snyder cut I'm looking at right there? Or what was that movie?
Well, you were saying about, not taking the source material word for word.
Yeah.
I love it, though.
But from my standpoint, is it one-sided though? Because I agree, and we always thought that the source material would be really great, with respect to that. And we always look to see our, superheroes come to life, even going back to the Superman movie, or even the serials from the 40s and so forth, like that, But what's Psychedelic saying? What about that 3 million plus SW number 8 arc? Will that drive that book? And, well, that's another thing, right?
That's another topic that probably needs to be fleshed out. I mean, I don't want to get too far off on a tangent, but that art selling for $3+ million for art for one page, that is going to drive some eyeballs to collect more. So that's like a different genre of investors in the comic book industry, or the secondary market, if you will.
That's definitely a conversation to have with Steve in the room for sure.
Oh yeah,
we'll do that.
Yeah,
with
where is
Steve.
he? He's watching Tool.
Yeah, Tool.
No love, Tool. Speaking of tools, can I say something?
Yeah.
Don't say my name after you say that.
Don't wait, I thought he was looking at me.
No, but I think the reason why the OA was brought up was because would that OA have cost that much if it weren't for the success of No Way Home or or
I say no.
in general, or I guess fans. You know,
that's a tough one. I think the popularity of the movie right now definitely influenced the final price. You know, it added a certain percentage, and there's no way to test that and quantify it, but I'm sure that there was a certain percentage of that price because of the movie popularity.
Yeah.
Let me try to drive this in a certain direction, though. Okay, because Matt Woods brought us to this is the source material. It's always been source material, and that's fine. But now, you know, what Psychedelic Comics brought up comes in that way. This happens as well with the comic books. You know, if you take a look at some of the heroes in their comic books, if there's anticipation they're going to be on a Disney Plus show, or they're going to appear in a movie or something like that, the price of the comic goes up, at least temporarily, right? So we see that movies use the comics as source material, and then kind of in a circular fashion, because there is a movie or there might be a character in a movie, it affects the price of the comic book. But in my opinion is that the movies themselves, you know, don't really bring sales to the comic books. I think there are a lot of people, and potentially even the buyer of that one page, you know, that doesn't buy comic books, doesn't see it as anything other than potentially an investment, you know, which helps to drive some of the prices of some of the comic books that we might want to buy up. But I don't know that it does anything to really bring more people into buying comic books and appreciating comic books, at least to a significant extent.
I would agree. I feel like, you know, there's already a somewhat set market of comic readers out there, and there's sort of like an Ouroboros, like a snake eating its tail of people just, you know, the movies feed the people who are already buying the comics, who then consequently go out and see the movies. I think the people who go see the movies, you know, there's a certain group of people that love the movies or consequently the TV series or animated series, but they never read a comic. They just like a very simple way to sort of feed their interest in the characters. And that's as far as it'll go for them. They will never bridge that gap to actually meet the original material. And we're just hoping, I think, that the next generation of readers will come around to keep the comic market going, you know. But like you said, we never see kids in stores, right? Unless they're with their parents, which is great because that's one generation having the other generation. But I don't think you get a lot of kids who are just on their own saying, I'm 12 now and I've got pocket money. I'm going to buy a comic book. They're going to buy a video game. They're going to do whatever. But, you know, or they'll go see the movie, but they won't buy the book. That's my feeling anyway. But
well, let me ask. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Let me ask you. Let me pose this question though. Do you think that's Marvel's and DC's fault for not exposing those MCU or DCU fans? Like, why couldn't they have comic books at the lobby of the theater, you know, to coincide with what's being released? Or if they've done more of that, do you think we'd see more, you know, MCU fans going to LCSs and whatnot?
I definitely agree with that, because I think when you're a big machine like Marvel or DC or like the cinematic universes of each, you're very, I think they're a little bit short-sighted in terms of, all right, what makes the most money? It's people going to the box offices, not necessarily people buying $3 books. And I think for them, they see, all right, let's just work on making the next big thing, not necessarily trying to push people towards like the LCSs. But I see, Matt, you want to mention something.
Well, I don't know if it's entirely true. Philtastic Phil has an absolutely great comment. This is something that I've thought about a little bit. You know, the movies don't necessarily translate into book sales immediately, but the TV shows and the movies do drive interest. People forget, or they don't realize, Batman was almost canceled by DC in the 1960s because the sales were absolutely so low. The Adam West show really brought the interest back into Batman. we would have, people in this lot, maybe Joe, you might have, but we would have really never heard of Batman, okay, if that Adam West show didn't come out. Now, what Philtastic is talking about here is when kids are kids, they're not going from the movies and then all of a sudden going and putting in pull lists in their LCS because they're kids. They don't have the money. And like, we might not think a $3 comic book is a big deal, but it is to that 12-year-old kid. But as those kids are growing up, you know, and we see 30-year-olds that are in the LCSs quite a bit. We might not see kids, but we see 30-year-olds. Well, back in 2000, those 30-year-olds today, they were 8 years old watching X-Men in the big screen movie theater and then watching Spider-Man. Where did they get their initial interest? I mean, Alan, you were a big fan of the X-Men animated series. So did you start reading comic books to get interested in the animated series, or did that animated series introduce you to comic books or the comic characters, and then you just wanted to read the stories? I do think that there's a back and forth relationship with movies, TV, and comics.
Yeah. I think there's that's a perfect point, because it was the animated series that started it for me. And that's what got me into X-Men in the 90s, the Jim Lee X-Men. I think it definitely is that ebb and flow, right? So maybe there's a huge lull of like kids not going to LCSs today, but maybe like you were saying, maybe 10 years from now, when they do grow older, they're going to be the ones going to the LCSs more so than the kids during that time.
Yeah. So it's just kind of fun to see that. My introduction to comic books was the 1960s Spider-Man, you know, where he's swinging in midair. I loved that show. It was on after school whenever I was like in preschool and kindergarten.
He had the goggles on.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
you want to hear the old guy here? When
What
I was
old guy?
growing up,
I know.
when I was growing up, I mean, I loved the George Reeves Superman. You know, for me, that was like a big deal. And you know, as soon as when Batman 89, well, Superman 77 and so forth was terrific as well. That was like so great, you know. And the second one I think was better than the first, although I liked the extended cut part of that. But then when Batman 89 came out with Michael Keaton, I'm telling you something. I mean, at that point I was older. We were married. I went with my best friend and his wife. My wife came along. We were like giddy like kids. That was like such a great thing, you know. But I didn't get back into comics at that point in time. I was waiting for the next movie. I wanted to see more of that, you know? So I don't think that was something that necessarily spurred me on to comics. And I'm not saying it has no effect, okay? I think there are some people who'll say, gee, what's this all about? Get there, maybe get into it. But I just don't see the reciprocity that people say. Now, maybe more people are into comics than ever. I think it was, I forget who, I think it was Brian that said that, you know, but is it more sales? They're making more money than ever, but they're charging so much money. So that's not really an apples to apples comparison, I don't think, you know?
I think, especially like after WandaVision, I think more and more people are exposed to comics because let's say you watch a Disney Plus show. Most people go to see a video that has Easter eggs and references and you know, like, because my wife, like, she's not into comics at all, but she knows who Mephisto is, you know?
Oh, wow.
So that did something for her, you know, that kind of, you know, maybe skew her a little bit more towards the sources because of people like us on YouTube who are providing extra information on the comic book movies or shows that are now very popular.
Well, I have let me try to bring something up if I can. I went to Comic-Con, so hold on a minute. Let me see if I can get this.
Gotta love the Comic-Con data.
Nah,
Here, let me
try to do this on my computer now, but I'm gonna give it a try.
Right. But while you're doing that, may I add something else?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think the comics and the medium have always had this like a symbiotic relationship.
Ooh, well done.
I know. I'm just flexing some muscles there because I can't compete with the comics you have behind your head, Matt. Uh, but anyway, like, you know, there's a symbiotic relationship because we have this innate affinity to storytelling, you know. So no matter what form it takes, we will go to that because, you know, movies, comics, radio shows, you know, they take us away from our day-to-day lives for just a moment. So, you know, if people thirst for that kind of thing, they will go to it. And I think, you know, maybe people are sick of watching the shows and okay, let me try these comics. Let's see the old resources because, you know, okay, we've seen everything pretty much, you know. So I think there's always that symbiotic relationship between comics and the movies.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Well, I kind of agree with that, you know, and to give but again, just give an example, like my best friend's wife has gotten very much into all the TV shows and movies, right? So I remember when the Shazam movie came out, I called up my best bud, John, and I said to him, I said, you know, let's go see the movie. He says, okay, but his wife has to come. I said, what? He goes, oh, she's really into like all the movies and TV shows and everything. So then I had to cajole my wife to come, who's not into any of that. I said, I'll go. I said, but why don't you come? We'll watch the movie. It's Shazam. It should be fun. It's not like a regular, typical superhero movie, I was telling her. I said, and then we'll go out to dinner and all that. So she came out there. So when we were on the way home, I said to her, I said, so what did you think? She goes, that was okay. That was
It was okay.
Because you took her to a Marvel movie. That's what I'm saying.
Whoa.
Oh,
Shots fired.
Low blow.
All right, let me try to get that.
Yeah.
Let me try to get that thing back up again. Let's see.
But I mean, I see your point because even though my wife has seen a lot of MCU and Disney Plus and all those movies, she's still not like yearning to get her hands on you know, Secret Wars 8 or something.
All right, so I'm gonna, Alan, you take a look at this because I have to go to the other tab because I only have one screen here, but I'm gonna try to go through this. I went here and this is the year-to-year sales. You see here it's the unit sales for all Diamond Comics. And this is the top 300 comic books. So obviously it's gonna be, they have it separately because apparently they didn't keep tabs on it earlier with that. So when we get to 2009, they do have all versus the top 300. Not much of a difference there. So if you take a look at this, just the top 300, look back at 1997. Look at the numbers. You have a real dip in 2000, 2001. So it's going back up again. But look at the numbers on this. Now, during this time, you know, with the Marvel stuff, you know, you might be able to say there might have been a jump, maybe because of mostly Marvel movies and stuff like that. But look what's happening recently. It's down to 76.9 million or 83 total. Look at 99 million. I mean, the numbers are not going up according to this. The numbers are going down, you know? So I'm not telling you that that's the case all the way throughout. But my premise is that it's not really helping comic book sales. It might be bringing more comic book type of people in, but I think the people that go to the comic books might be more like investors, maybe the person who bought that one page, which is a lunatic price to pay for one page that's there. So at least that's kind of my premise on that. So you guys can tell me I'm wrong, but that's kind of the way I see it.
No, I think you're right. And I'm going to bring up something that Dave said here. Oh, sorry. This is exactly why I think that is so true. Right. If you think about in the 90s, right, there's no streaming. Like you watch one episode of XMen per week, and that's the only time you could see it. There's no other way to pull in more media or more information other than, hey, let me go find the source material. But now with everything so readily available to everyone, they could just rewatch the same thing over and over again, or like find different shows. So maybe they get their fix from streaming instead of having to, you know, be forced to, like, if I want to find something new, I have to go to the LCS and grab something there. So I think that really matches with what happened in the 90s versus what's available now.
Yeah, I think streaming makes a huge difference because I think it was more of an argument even like 10 years ago people, not just kids, but adults, had a limited amount of, discretionary funds to use for fun. And it's like, what am I going to do with that money? And, I don't think it's a stretch to say that the people who love comics themselves are the same people who are video gamers, are the same people who are like that niche genre type stuff. So they're like, well, I can buy a $60 video game, or I can go buy a handful of comics. And they had to make a choice on what they're going to do. But now with the streaming services, you pay a nominal fee. You have ongoing access as many times as you want to see something that you love. And now I think you have more discretionary funds to be able to go now spend a little bit more money on comic books or something else, or video games, and you have more money to make a choice with. So the question is, are they actually spending that money on the comics themselves, or are they like, I'm getting my fix from being able to watch Arrow whenever I want, but now I'm going to go buy a video game that I enjoy? And are they the same people who are like, I'm going to spend $79.95 Canadian on buying the new Spider-Man video game, rather than take that money and spend it on a Spider-Man comic book? I think I just think people are spending their money elsewhere, not necessarily comics, unless you're already a comics person.
I think there's a lot of validity to what Wayne said. I mean, there's a lot of different choices, but I think that information could be spun in a different way. I don't think that movies would translate 1,000% into comic book sales, but it does lead into the video games. But do the video games lead to the movie sales? I think it's just, there's money being directed, a certain percentage of it, into the comic book market from movies. And guys, there have been movies that have inspired comic books. Star Wars. Star Wars was a movie before it was ever a comic book. Godzilla, which I think was just being talked about a couple nights ago on some other person's channel that I've never heard about. You have Predator, that was a movie before it was a comic book. You have Aliens, which was a movie before a comic book. And guys, I do without a doubt think that movies can gain interest into comic books. I have a handful of comic books here that were movie inspired. These two right here, these are Spawn movie editions. They came out whenever the movie was released.
I remember those.
Why would Image release those whenever a movie came out? Because they knew that they could make a quick buck from it. And I have a handful of other movie specials, but here is a Conan the Barbarian movie special. And actually, I realized that I have 2 copies of 2 different books. But why would Marvel release those? Is like I said, they knew that there was a quick buck that they could make by printing these, and they still had to pay the artists, they still had to pay the writers to put it into comic book format. So I don't believe that movies will generate 100% of comic book sales, but there is a certain percentage that is being driven back to the comic book source material, and hopefully, I know, Conan, what are the odds?
What are the odds?
If only I could get a He-Man, that would be a good thing. Okay, but that's a inside joke, and I do digress. But anyhow, there is a certain amount of money that goes, from back and forth. Okay, some comic book fans go see the movies because they like the source material. So the movies like knowing that the comic book fans are a built-in market. Well, vice versa. Some of those new kids that go there with their dads or their uncles or their grandpas who like these characters, they're going to take them to an LCS, and maybe those kids won't be, like I said before, pull list, subscribers, but maybe whenever they get older, they'll get in, they'll find themselves to an LCS somewhere and then become a legitimate comic book buyer.
Yeah. Well, another cool example where the movies, or in this case, TV, affect comics is, look what Paul Dini did with Mr. Freeze back in the animated series, Heart of Ice. It's like he fleshed out that character, and now that his ideas made their way to the comics. So, so the TV can influence the comics as well. And I also want to
Harley
bring
Quinn,
up,
right? Harley Quinn.
Yes.
Yeah.
Another perfect example as well. But also, it's kind of frustrating too, because we can't see the trends like 10 years from now. You know, because because now there's a new generation of potential comic fans, and we're also getting to the point with streaming and movies that it's getting expensive. Like Netflix just raised their price.
Yeah.
So, you know, eventually mom and dad's going to cut out one of those things and they can't get their comic fix. So what's cheaper? Comics, right? So I could see a potential.
Boom.
Older guys can understand that reference.
I get it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Happy
I was in a different live
birthday,
stream tonight talking to
Mr.
Bill.
President.
So,
You know, just to add one thing to what Pretty Fly was saying was, now correct me if I'm wrong, because again, I'm not really buying new books right now, but I understand that the new She-Hulk is kind of bringing her back around to being more kind of what it was in the 80s and early 90s. And because I guess she went through a lot of a character arc where she kind of wasn't as recognizable as the kind of the, yeah, she kind of got more red and a whole bunch of things happened. Now they're kind of going to bring her back into what I think they're going to line it with the kind of the character as it's going to be portrayed in the Disney Plus series, which is kind of having the comics tie back into how they want the MCU to portray a character. There's kind of that. It's not so much that the comics is feeding the show, but the show is now going to feed the comics in terms of character arc or character style. So there's that too, I think, which kind of feeds a little bit on what you were saying.
Symbiotic relationship, like I'm saying.
Symbiotic relationship.
bada bing. But now, Anachronic Comics, I have a question there. Do you like She-Hulk because she's an attorney?
I do like She-Hulk because she's an attorney, but I'll tell you what my introduction to She-Hulk was. During Civil War, right, Marvel Civil War, it was towards, I forget the exact year, but I had started collecting not too much earlier than that, okay? And so being that I was just relatively new, I saw Civil War, and I think it was the first kind of extended arc that had these other comic books that had little parts to it and things like that, whatever. I forget what the wording is used for this stuff, but anyway, so what I did was I said to myself, I've got to collect all the comic books. So I had every Civil War comic, whatever, Civil War Journal, whatever happened in Iron Man or Captain. I bought every single one of them. The problem was that I was too late with She-Hulk #8. Okay, so I had to get a second printing. And I'm saying, what the hell is this shit? Second printing? I'm not getting second printing. I started searching for the first printing because I thought I had to get the first printing, right? So I looked, I couldn't find the first printing anyway. So I went on eBay and somebody was selling numbers 1 through 12, the whole package of it. So I bought the whole package 1 through 12 so I could have the first printing of She-Hulk #8. I took that first printing, put it in my Civil War Connection sheet. That second printing, put it in the 1 to 12. So if I ever sell 1 to 12 on eBay, you'll know that #8 is the second printing of it. So that was my introduction to She-Hulk.
I just want to say that I'm sitting down that you bought that many Marvel books on purpose.
I didn't know any better.
Even monkeys fall from the tree from time to time, right?
Whoa.
Anyway,
so
the
that's my
one time,
She-Hulk.
and Joe and I, we talked about this one other time, but the one time, there's the first time I got to hang out with Joe, we're in a whole room of comic books. I mean, thousands and tens of thousands of books in this room. And I buy DC books. It was a bad day.
You bought 2 of them.
Yeah, 2. That was good.
That was good.
Can I bring something up there?
Stories on DC. And honestly, we're talking about the movies and comic books. DC's really who started the comic book movie genre. I mean, the George Reeves Superman, they were big hits back in the day, but I really think the Christopher Reeves Superman, they made the leap in technology and filmmaking allowed them to do a Superman movie. And that really drew a lot of people into comic books from the movies. I think that was the biggest single comic book movie event ever.
It was big.
Yeah. Followed
Yeah,
by
that's awesome.
89 Batman.
89 Batman was another. Well, again, DC.
Well, I think with that particular comic book, Matt, I think you might be right. I mean, that particular movie, I think it might have brought people into comic books. I know around me, there was a lot of people who got interested in saying, what's the comic book like? What's happening, with respect to that. And, there were a bunch of things that happened. And I'm not talking about what happens in comic books that might affect comic book sales and that type of stuff. We're talking about movies and TV shows. So I do think that there is some interest that grows in that. But I think because comic books have become so speculative now, that a lot of times I don't know whether people see that as, oh, instead of buying, 100 shares of Apple, I can buy, I don't know, ASM number 5 or whatever might be comparable with respect to that. So I always question that because I don't know that really works that way. So there is more interest, but I think there are a lot of people who just are interested in the movies and the TV shows and will follow them. And as a practical matter for me, as I was mentioned in the beginning, I love watching the Marvel movies. I watch the Marvel TV shows, even watch the old like Spider-Man cartoons and that type of thing. I love that stuff, but it doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to go out and buy, an Avengers comic book. I don't have much interest in buying an Avengers comic book, at this point in time. But I am very interested in watching what's going to be the next iteration of the Avengers once Kevin Feige gets to where he's going to get with respect to that,
Well, I just thought
I think this subject could be, put out a lot broader. Listen, movies are easy to watch. Okay, there are a couple hours. You go, you live in a fantasy world in your head for a little bit. It's all given to you. But there's always been readers, okay? People that'll just crack open a book, whether it's a comic book or a novel, doesn't matter. But I feel that the people that are willing to put down the time and effort to read a book, that number is a lot smaller than those that are willing to go to that 2.5-hour movie, because there's a different type of person that will read that book. So while I think our topic could just be in society in general, because how many people will go watch a Stephen King movie but won't read the book, or vice versa, okay? Or the Harry Potter movies, extremely popular books, but people would rather go see the movie in a lot of cases. But there's still a large number of people that are willing to read the books, even if they go see the movies, because they want to see, the difference. Because let's be honest, when you're reading a story, your mind takes it into a place that the movies and TV can't and won't. Right. So there's always going to be less people that enjoy the source material or whatever, the graphic novel or the novel, than the visual display on there.
Yeah.
Well, just piggyback onto that. I think part of the problem is it's such a commitment for people to read the books. Because you can't just be like, I'm going to enjoy a movie for 2 hours. There's your self-contained story, and I can walk away and get back to my life.
Yes.
Whereas if you want to read a Spider-Man and you pick up the new issue, it's like, I'm in the middle of a story arc. I don't know who half these characters are. They weren't in the movie. I don't know who they are. I have to go back at some point, pick up and start to read through and commit time and money to get a story arc from beginning to end. And if I enjoy it, I'll continue it. But most people aren't going to do that. The best bet for people like that, and I'd be curious to see what the numbers are, people who do Marvel Unlimited or Comixology or something where they can get a bigger bang for their buck by going back and reading all these books digitally at their convenience at a reasonable price, rather than committing, $4 every month and also trying to remember what's going on. And in the case of, say, Batman, well, 75% of DC's books right now are Batman books. Which ones do I read? How do I follow the story? What's going on here? How is it affecting this other book that I'm not spending money on? Right? It's a huge commitment financially and time-wise to people that most people, unless you're already predestined to, or interested in doing that thing, are not going to do it. I think. But
well, to add to your point there, Wayne, my goal for this year is to read all the ASM books from number 1 actually from AF-15 and 1 all the way up to modern day. I'm expecting it to take me most of the year because I'm a busy guy, and it's not, it takes a lot of commitment of time to set aside to read that much.
Yeah.
Why did you run out of Conan books to read?
I've read all those. Yeah, don't worry about that.
Can I bring something up
go ahead.
let's kind of flip the table a little bit on this, because I want to highlight how powerful comics are, because comic books have changed the movie industry like forever. I think.
Yes.
Because I'm not going to go like Martin Scorsese, get off my lawn comments about comic books, but before the MCU, there were movie stars, or people want to see a movie because they had stars in them. People want to see movies because there's a certain director attached to them. But now it's like we see because of whatever property we've invested our time in. Even Robert Downey Jr. has fallen victim to this, because remember, I think when he did Iron Man 3, he's like, I'm done because I want to do other things. And he did a movie called The Judge. It was a great movie, but nobody went to see it. Yeah. Or
Dr. Dolittle.
And it's like, that's just the way we watch movies. The way we watch movies now is like, it's so different from when I was growing up. It could be bad as well, because the marketing for these comic book movies are so they're like juggernauts that there's no room for. Have you guys seen the Last Duel with Ben Affleck? And do you even know there's a Ben Affleck movie that's out there called The Last Duel, starring Ben Affleck and Matt Damon?
I've heard of it.
I've
Ridley
heard
Scott,
of it, yeah.
Ridley Scott, Gladiator. That's my point.
Yeah, I have a response to this, by the way.
It's like, I'm not saying it's bad, but I'm saying it's bad because the marketing's hogging all our attention.
Mm-hmm.
But when I was a kid, yes, I watched '89 Batman. Yes, I watched The Dark Knight, but I still had room to watch, I don't know, Forrest Gump. How would Forrest Gump do nowadays? Would anybody have seen Forrest Gump if it came out today?
I think
that's a pretty good movie. I think it would do well.
Comic book
You
movies.
think so? Like who's this guy that's just running around? Is he gonna just run around the whole movie? It's like, it's like, yes, it's a good movie, but my point though is that will it even be marketed the same way it was back then?
I think this is a bigger issue than just comic book movies. And I hope to not offend people, but outside of the comic books, okay, and some of those movies have been not the greatest movies, so it's not like every comic book movie's great. There was a Zack Snyder cut movie that wasn't any good, but anyhow, joking.
Flip over the table.
Yeah, I know. But anyhow, I think Hollywood's
Matt, we
having
can
a
pull
hard
you.
time.
Matt, we could very easily
cut his
pull
feed,
you off
please.
this,
Cut his feed.
show.
This is your show. You have the power to cut
I
his
think
feed.
Hollywood's having a hard time putting out a quality product right now. It's a lot of hit or miss. And even Forrest Gump, guys, that was a book before it was a movie.
Yeah.
So,
Road to Perdition was a comic book.
what's that?
Yeah.
Road to Perdition was a comic book. And it's a
Well, let me
Okay.
ask you a question, because we're talking about other movies with
Get
these
'em.
people on it. So, how many
Joe
of
sent
you
Bruno out too,
have
right?
seen?
Don't worry.
Right. How many of you guys have seen Red Notice?
Didn't bother.
How many
I've
of you have
actually
heard of
watched
Red
it.
Notice?
I've heard of it.
I have heard of it.
I have Netflix. I just haven't seen it.
I've
It's
seen it.
really it's a fun movie, right? And it's got The Rock in it.
Mhm.
It's got Gail Gadot in it, and it's got some guy that played Deadpool, whatever his name was. I think he played Green Lantern too.
Ryan Reynolds.
Yeah, I know. Ryan Reynolds. Anyway,
He plays Ryan Reynolds, by the way.
yeah, he plays Ryan Reynolds as well. But anyway, so I actually looked into that movie on Netflix, and I run the movies here in the community, and I'm going to show it tomorrow night because I think the people will like it.
Mhm.
It's a fun movie.
Mhm.
Now, I may not have looked for it or at it and I think it had a pretty good Netflix run, so to speak. But it had Reynolds in it and Godot and it had Johnson in it. So to me, I said, "Oh, this looks interesting because I know these people. Let me see what it's like." And I really enjoyed the movie.
Yeah.
But I may not have looked at it except for the fact of who was in it.
Yeah.
And I followed Gail Godot on whatever it is, one of the things, and she was tweeting about it. So I said, "Oh, let me see what this is about."
We all do.
Yeah, I know we all do. Yeah.
But because Rock is like one of the last movie stars, that's probably what got you, is because he still has that star quality that we used to have with Tom Cruise, Mel Gibson, back in the day.
Yeah.
And I think it was Gail Godot for me, really, though. I think that was it.
So I have a response to Pretty Fly's like influence of comics into movies, because I also think that there's a huge influence of movies into comics, right? And calling back about like, Harry Potter, people who watched the movies ended up reading the books, vice versa. What I think is that the directors, the people that produce all of the content that come out for comics, they're very important stewards of this genre. Because if you think about it, the majority of like the world does not read comics. The only insight they have into these characters are through the movies. So if these characters are portrayed in a certain way or another, even they may not be the same as the source material, but the way that they're portrayed is the mass like idea of how this person is. And sorry, this might be like a hot take and people may not like it. Sorry, Pretty Fly Joe. The way that I see like, the way that I see Superman, right? Like, to me, he's not a godlike character that was portrayed in like the Justice League. He's more of like, he grew up in Kansas. Like, he has a family. He's rooted as a human being. He's not like this godlike character, to me, at least from the stories that I've read. But I feel like that might have been a little bit of a miss, where it's just like, let's go to the root of these characters because that's how people see and portray them. Because if they're like, oh, I don't really connect with this character from the movies, then I won't necessarily want to buy their book, right? I think that's an important way to pull people in. Let's pull people in with like the popular story arcs from the popular like medium, which we all like, but not everyone has access to. And I'll leave it at that. I know Pretty Fly, you have something to say.
I do. It's funny you mentioned that, because I heard an interview with Bruce Timm, and he said, because he's deep into DC as well. Bruce Timm's the one who did Batman, the animated series, and so on and so forth. But he said, according to DC, comics are just testing grounds for stories that they want to do in the movies. So
really?
They'll release a story idea, and they'll assess the numbers on interest and whatnot, and then okay, let's do a movie kind of like that. They may put the label of an old movie, but they'll put in a new story based on how well readers react to whatever story that they come up at that time.
And that's because there's these big companies now, and it's dollar driven. So I agree with you, and I read that article as well. And I don't think that they really care necessarily. I mean, if they make money on the comic books, that's fine. They'll charge as much as we're willing to pay, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if they can get $10 a comic book, they'll get it, and that's fine. But really, it is fertile ground for movies. And I think it was Fantastic that indicated that these are safe movies for them now, because if you put one out, chances are you're going to make a ton of money, on it, because people like us are going to go. I think, who was it? I think Madam Blaster and that other guy had indicated they were going to see the Spider-Man movie for like the third or the fourth time. I mean, how many of us go more than once to the movies to see these? I generally don't.
No.
But I think there's a lot of people who go. I know people that I know that will go 2 and 3 times to see a Marvel movie or whatever, because that's a big deal to them. It's an occurrence. It's like we're going to have a party type of thing that's there.
Yeah.
But they're not going to go out and buy a Spider-Man comic book. I mean, that's the material for the movies right now.
But let me ask you this: like, name me the source material for that movie.
Say that again.
Ooh, good
Like
question.
what story, what source material did they draw from for Spider-Man?
That was an
Spider-Man
original
No Way Home?
story.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's true.
yeah, it has Spider-Man in it. Yes, it has multiverse in it.
Doctor
you can
Strange
say-
and all that, but it's a
Oh, you can say
original
yeah, it's
story.
kind of
Good movie. Yeah.
it's kind of like one more day because you have to forget some, But
Mhm.
but to be honest, like what source did they drew that movie from? Right? Because I was trying to figure it out. It's like, oh, maybe I just missed the story.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's
But
kind of like One More Day, but it's not exactly.
it's not.
You know?
It's just like maybe just the
Yeah,
idea
a
of
little
that he has to
smidgen
forget.
of that story,
Yeah.
but not the whole thing.
Yeah. So I mean, even in this movie, it has elements of maybe, Death of Superman or Dark Knight.
You had this
But-
already.
Look at him.
They do. They combine. That's because it's source material, so they don't care that if it follows directly what the story has to
Right.
say. You know.
Mhm.
Right, but it doesn't really. There's no like one source material that really kind of they drew from. There's like,
But-
oh, there's an idea of it over there. There's an idea of it over there. Oh, yeah,
I'm,
let's
I'm
bring
gonna
Doomsday.
mention. You mentioned you sent me this article, Pretty Fly, about Kevin Feige, right? So I think of pre-Kevin Feige movies for Marvel and post-Kevin Feige. So if you
X-Men
think
one.
about, like all of the Kevin Feige since he took over as president, like they're all kind of intertwined. And I feel like
Mhm.
because he understands and he appreciates and he is a steward, I will say he was a proper steward of the content. He is
Right.
properly making new stories in the movie genre that is like tied together and is very much so like a story arc we would all like if it was made into a comic in the first
Yeah.
place. And so I think
Yeah.
that's good.
Like because my pitch. Go ahead, Wayne. Sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. No, finish what you're saying. Sorry.
But my pitch for introducing the X-Men is not really celestial Eternals or whatnot, because if you're an average fan, like,
Yeah.
But my pitch would be like, why don't you make the Infinity Stones, since it affected everybody? Infinity Stones have radiation. That's why they got Banner to come in. Why not make the Infinity Stones the result or of the mutation? Because of the Infinity Stone. But my point though is that that's not from the source material, but it's something that may be plausible for the movies because
Yeah, it's very
the
plausible.
fans know about it, the stones and know about, but they don't know about deviants and whatever.
Mhm.
Comic book movies they've had minor success in the past, okay? But until the MCU came out with Iron Man, the first one, and then they did Hulk and then the Thor and Captain America. Until then, comic book movies were for the most part written by the studios, and they were always missing. And if you had a comic book that was 100% adaptation if you had a comic book movie that was 100% adaptation from a comic book story, the sales wouldn't be that great for it because everyone's going to know how it ends. But when they started getting comic book writers to actually write the scripts for them, it just became a whole different game. It was like what we are reading, and it might not be an exact book per se, but it was this type of stories that we were used to reading now showing up on the big screen. That's whenever the interest in the movies really exploded.
Excellent point.
And
Excellent
you
point.
can
Very good
say Spider-Man, the Sam Raimi one, because of the special effects allowed that movie to be made whenever it was. The special effects had something to do with it, but guys, let's be honest. Spider-Man 3 was nobody's favorite movie by any stretch because they got so far away from comic book writing that it just wasn't enjoyable. We're all dancing and I'm missing something.
Well, because
Spider-Man 3.
Peter Parker was dancing in that.
But I want to just add something
back
on.
dancing. Okay.
I just want to add something on to what was said earlier about kind of them giving, in a way, I guess there was something being said about them the giving fans kind of what they want, and where Kevin Feige is stewarding this. I kind of can't help but wonder, did No Way Home come from the fact that they listened to what the fans said going into some of the stuff from Far From Home, where they intimated there was a multiverse, even though we ended up the multiverse that Mysterio came from wasn't real, and how much they went, wow, people started saying things like, why did we get all the Spider-Man together? Wouldn't that be like the coolest thing ever? And they went, you know what? That's a license to print money. Since people are actually saying it, let's do it. And then they just started like sort of hearing what the fans were saying, and they're just like, okay, yeah, let's put that in. Next thing you know, we had, No Way Home, and it's like almost like a love letter to the fans, giving them exactly what they wanted. So,
well, to support to what you just said, Wayne, who did they cast for Mr. Fantastic? Or rumor is, who did they cast for Mr. Fantastic?
Oh, John Krasinski.
Yeah, because everybody's.
Well, I don't know if they've done it. Have they done it? Have they? Is that the word now? I know that he was supposed to interview or go in and see them about something, but I said the other day in the chat for that other channel that we sometimes go to, that if John Krasinski is cast, then Rainn Wilson has to be cast as Doctor Doom.
Yeah,
that'd be like the best. That'd be the best.
Beats Bears. Baxter Building.
Baxter Building.
To go back to something Matt said, Matt, that was a great point you made. With the comic book writers, writing the movies and TV shows, because on my video about the 5 things that DC did well in 2021, I mentioned Stargirl. Now, I was never a big Stargirl reader or whatever else. I do have like #1 and a few other things like that, some of the others, but Jeff Johns, I always kind of liked his writing, that he did even on the Green Lantern and Flash and that type of stuff. And I read that stuff, even though I wasn't really a big Green Lantern person or what have you. So when he was doing that, I said, let me take a look at it. And, once you get past that, their kids there, like becoming the new JSA, to me, it was like, wow, this is really written really well. And it progressed through. And it was only like 13 or 14 episodes. So it was almost like, kind of a limited series in terms of a comic book. But they built it up. The JSA was in there. Some of the, the criminals, from the 40s were in there. And they just did it really well. And then they moved over into the second season. And it was just during summer school. But they played off a lot of Easter eggs they put in the first season and the grand finale that showed who the bad was going to be in the next season. And they played it out. I mean, it was just really so well done. Now he's an executive producer, which means he's basically like one of the showrunners. So whether or not he's actually writing this stuff or not, I'm not exactly sure. I know he wrote a lot of the first season, but I'm sure he's outlined and set out how the second season is supposed to be. And when you have that, I think you do have a better, a quality show or movie, at least so far as comic book fans are concerned.
Yeah,
and I think you hit it right on the head there.
Fans, you owe it to the fans to have like what Feige's doing, because he understands comics. I was telling Alan, is like X-Men 1 was, I think, the moment that the producers saw comic book movies are going to be lucrative. Let's do them. Because our graphics and technology has caught up with what's needed to make these movies that they are now. And who was the associate producer in X-Men 1? Alan?
Feige.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes.
So
yes,
he knew what he was doing from the get-go. So
yeah.
Well, his whole idea of setting up the Marvel universe, I mean, I think, and building on it, putting the different things in the movies and building towards, the Avengers conclusion. I mean, that was just epically intelligent, smart, or whatever you want to call it, to do. And, a lot of it is kind of strange. And I think that's in many ways how DC faltered, because they just didn't know what they're doing. That I think some of their movies have been good, but you don't have this, kind of the continuity thing. And they rushed the Justice League to it. Then they, when they got rid of Zack Snyder, or he left, and they just messed that whole thing up so badly that, I don't see why they just don't come back and decide how they're going to do it and follow through. I think Shazam was a good movie. I liked Wonder Woman, though I thought the first one was better. A lot of their movies, I thought Aquaman was a good movie. So a lot of it is really good, but They don't understand that the comic book fans are the ones that push these things.
Yeah.
And we are married to like continuity. So we can accept the multiverse and different versions and that type of stuff, you know. But a continuity, so you see the same, you see Iron Man show up in the Captain America movie, in the Spider-Man movie, and that type of thing. That gives us joy. It always gave me joy. That's why when the Justice League came up, that's why I still collected, because to me, the big thing was, wow, there's more than one hero together, and they actually talk to each other, you know, in the same adventure. That wasn't a lot going on back then, you know, in those early days with respect to that. That's why I love the Avengers. That's why I love the X-Men. That's why I would be reading those Marvel books with respect to that, because to me that was significant. And then you all of a sudden you saw Spider-Man in the FF comic book. You know, you saw the Avengers and Spider-Man. You saw all these different continuities. The Marvel movies are just doing the same thing right now, playing towards one end.
I mean, the Fantastic Four was in Amazing Spider-Man #1. I mean, they've been doing that, you know, switching characters from day one.
Yeah.
Now, Joe,
so I have a go ahead, Lenny.
No, go ahead. You guys heard enough from me. Go ahead.
No. I had a question for all of you. Just for this, like for this topic, in terms of like, if you were all new comic book collectors, if you were all getting into this comic book hobby, and you watch this movie, would you think you'd be the one going in and like overpaying for like these original comic books that are keys? Like, do you think those are the people driving up like comic book prices, or do you think, because I think it's just like the people that are already in the hobby. Like, I don't think it's necessarily new people coming in because of the movies like driving things up.
I think there's a certain level of people who are collectors, wine collectors, who are seeing media playing up sports cards and comics and other collectibles as being like this place where these values are increasing. So maybe they're diversifying their portfolios and putting money into these things. There's, I think, a small part, but I really think it's collectors and collectors who have money, collectors who have means and are willing to spend those means to get these books. And and people kind of even in the I don't know the right way to put this, feeding into their own collectibles market. Like, for instance, I don't know if you guys noticed, but Ken Golden posted that he bought the Action Comics 6.0 and it's been added to his collection. And Ken Golden is a big sports card collector, like guy, like that's his thing, right? So he's the guy who put the money into it. So you kind of got feeding its own kind of thing, right? So, you know, people with means who are collectors who love this kind of thing are putting that money back into the hobby for their collections and driving those prices up. So,
yeah, I'd hate to think though that it's just rich people trying to hide their money in comics.
So if the market doesn't fall out.
Look,
I look at it different. I look at it from an economics point of view, you know, aggregate demand versus aggregate supply. Okay. Without a doubt, the base market are the traditional comic book collectors, but what's driving up the prices is it's not the supply is decreasing, because there's more and more books being sent to CGC that people are finding and realizing have value. So the supply of even Silver Age books has literally been going up. It's the demand that's been going up. And where is the demand coming from? I don't think it's just traditional collectors solely. It's definitely the largest part. But I think people are coming in and just trying to find something to park money in, like somebody just said. And that's what's taken the prices from being high like they always have. But they used to be at a point where if you had a job and, you know, a regular working Joe, you might be able to afford some of these keys. It's getting to the point where that ship is sailing on a lot of books to being affordable.
Yeah.
I think the demand is rising.
Pokemon.
Is what's happening, which means new customers.
Right. I mean, but what sucks though is that they're driving actual collectors like us. We're being priced out.
But
Yeah.
it also works in a different way. Okay, I've got some books. I'll show you one right here. This
Is
book.
it Conan? I knew it was
Sorry,
Conan.
I have a
Yes.
different copy. All right, Conan, right? But
We should have a
you
drinking
saw
game, a
me,
Conan drinking game.
Roy Thomas signed this book, but it was a different copy. Guys, I bought this book almost 20 years ago. It's like 2003, 2004. I bought it for like $50, or at least the one that Joe saw. And the value of the book, I don't even want to say because it's so ridiculous right now. And so whenever we say like the average collector can't afford some of these books, well, some of these books that I paid $50 for, well, if I realize I can flip them, then maybe I could afford some of these big giant keys like the AF-15 or the Tales of Suspense 39, stuff like that. But I won't ever sell a Conan book though. Okay, let's get that real. Okay. Actually, I might sell a Conan book if I have a double of it.
Well, I'll tell you something. I think there are people, whether it's people that come over for sports cards or people that see it. I mean, I was just having a conversation with a friend of mine. I've known the guy for 30 years, and he was down here, and I was talking about I don't know how it came up, but we're talking about like the comic books came up, and so I was telling him, I said, "Oh yeah, I'm doing this. I'm trying to store them in the right place. When I redo the house that I have at the Cape, I'm going to have a comic book room, and it's going to be like climate controlled." I'm going through the whole thing with him. And so he starts asking me questions about it. So I take out my CLZ on my phone. I take out the phone and I have CLZ on it. And I'm saying, well, here's some comics I have, and here are some of the values. Then I go to go collect. I pull them up. I show him some of the values. His jaw dropped. And I don't have anything like Matt's Conan, extremely high, but I have some comics, and I told him some of these that are raw, I know I can get like over $1,000 for them, even in not good shape. And I said, if I get them graded, and I said they'd be worth so much more, and I said that's kind of one of the things I'm looking at as to what to do and how to do it, because I have a lot of these older comics, and even if you have something that's a 3.0 or a 4.0, but it gets graded, I said, the value is going to shoot up tremendously. And these are comics that some people will want. And if I wanted to sell them, I could sell them in 2 seconds, And so he was saying, I don't understand. I'm saying people are looking like these right now as investment vehicles in some respects. I mean, not necessarily collectors, but even collectors have a little bit of a speculator side of them. Whether it's like Matt was saying, or Reggie says, to have it pay, for the hobby and that type of thing, whatever it happens to be. Then you're still a speculator. You may have your collection, but you're getting stuff. You're buying multiple copies. Matt, I remember you showing that you bought a number of copies of ASM 55. Now, did you buy it because you really liked the cover so much? I think you bought it because you thought, hey, maybe at some point in time I can make some money on that, and maybe then go ahead and buy something else that I really want for the collection. Well, that's
a good friend of mine let me know about that book in a DM one day. Thanks, Pretty Fly.
Sliding
he
your
cued
DM.
me in on it. But you're right. There is, without a doubt, a little bit of speculation involved.
And the movies do that too, right?
Yeah.
If you think a movie's coming out, that's
true.
Speculation.
I bought Giant Size just because I heard the news that Disney was interested in Fox.
That's
a good
investment.
Trigger.
Yeah.
I'm happy with a facsimile. I mean, there's my wall's covered with them. so it's just it was an investment move for me. But I mean, look at when Jay-Z. Now Jay-Z's interested in comics, and it's like it's hard to deny that investors who are not collectible or collectors interested in our precious books.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but collectors are too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing. So
Sure.
that's part of it anyway. So Doug Bratton thinks that it was a smart buy. Pretty fly.
It was a
Very
flyby.
smart. Yep. But collectors, I mean, I'm not a speculator in the traditional sense, but for collectors to deny that they're speculators is just disingenuous, okay? Who's ever gone to a comic book shop buying your regular pull list, but you see a handful of number ones on the wall, and you're like, you know what, I'm going to give that book a shot, and it might go up in value, and you throw a few bucks away, and you don't think about it, but what were you just doing? You were speculating, hopefully, that book would go up in value so that you could flip it to buy a book that that you do collect. So we do speculate, even if we don't like to admit it.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
No, nothing at all.
Now, Phil Tastic, are you talking about the capital gains situation or what? What exactly are you talking about? You want to clarify that question? Because I'm hoping it's nothing bad that's going to affect me.
Right?
Uncle Sam.
Anyway, we might have lost
But,
Alan. I don't know what happened to him. He's gone. He didn't like
No,
that.
I
last
Decided he
question.
was done.
No, I think he went to check the price for his giant size X-Men. He just went to look it up.
That's it.
It's like, let me go on
He
eBay.
heard
real quick.
taxes. He thought Uncle Sam was coming, so he's like, ducked out. and said,
See
"No."
that? Pretty fly?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, so anyway, we got started with movies and how they might affect comics and comics affect movies. And we got into the speculation, which is, I think, what always happens with this. And it's one of the things that, look, we always say collect what you want, collect what you want. There's no bad way of collecting. We're all a little bit of speculators with respect to that. But I know when I was a kid, the fact that we didn't know the movies, that these books are going to be worth anything, just made us enjoy it because we enjoyed the books. You know,
Good
and Matt,
stories,
remember when we were down with Roy Thomas, and I was talking to him about like my connection with him in the past, and that I had won that original art page from Justice League of America. I think it was number 3, but I got lost. I don't know what happened to it. And you remember what he said? He said, "Well, yeah, we never knew that these things were going to be worth anything." He told me that he had original pages of JLA artwork, and he actually cut out the panels.
Oh no.
Yeah, I mean, so in those days,
Master
it was
Blaster's
stuff
crying
that-
right now.
Yeah.
It was stuff that we loved.
In the middle of a
But
Tool
now it's
concert,
like,
he's just crying.
It's always like, oh, what's the value? Oh, look what I got here. We talk about should we crack one of these open because we see some principal defects, and that might be another topic we talk about, how to do that, right? But do you do that? Why are you doing that? If you like the comic and it's been graded, and basically it's graded because you want to preserve it, well, then you crack it open. Why? To press it? Why? So you can get from whatever the grade was, you get a bump up of a grade. Why do you want to do that? Is it because you want to have something that looks better, or is it because it's going to be worth that amount more? I mean, we all do that, and I think movies play into that part of it. But again, my view is it doesn't necessarily play into people buying things because they, love the comics or love the stories. That's it.
But I'm just thinking now, though, I'm just imagining the generations that have grown to love these MCU movies. What are their habits when they have money? It's like maybe the numbers will go up 20 years from now because the MCU fans, Disney Plus fans, are now, maybe they develop an interest in art, so now they're buying,
maybe, but listen, I think we've been going like over an hour here, so let me end this up with this particular story here. So as part of the discussion I was having with my friend, we came up to, will these things go up or down? And I said, it's going to fluctuate probably, but pretty much, when you take a look at some of these costs, they're always going to be, I said, like my ASM, number 5 or whatever, or my number 9, or my, Avengers number 2 or 3 or 10, whatever it happens to be, or 4. It's always going to be in demand because there'll be people there. So he says to me, well, how do you know that's going to be the case down the road? I said, here's the key. I said, everybody else that I know that I deal with is probably 25 to 35 years younger than me. So they'll still be collecting comics when I'm either long gone or if I'm 80 something and say, I'm going to sell these comics now. You know? I got people right here that'll buy them. Because it's I'm sitting pretty. I
want those
think.
Batman cards.
Right?
Yeah.
Batman cards. I know you said Wayne's gonna have them, but I want this.
Well, listen, I told some people, including some people here, if you're really interested in it, you know, I'll keep you in mind. Well, I got a couple of people that actually sent me notes saying, these are the ones I'm interested in. I didn't really mean that, but you know, it's fine. So I'll keep that in mind. And if when it comes to the point,
You did to those cards what Reggie did to ASM 110.
Yes.
Anything that's folded, keep me on your list. Anything that you received that was folded.
Anyway, yeah, I mean, honestly, if I decide to sell at some point in time, which I might, but I'm trying to get my son into this thing. And so I told him, I said, I'm going to start just getting rid of comics, giving away, selling some comics that I don't care about. A lot of the more modern ones, especially too, even if I just get a few dollars for them. You know what his answer to me was? And he's not a comic collector, but I showed him what I have. I've started going through some of the ideas with him because he's the one who's going to get them if I don't get rid of them before I'm gone. So he tells me his answer is, don't do that. And that kind of surprised me. I said, well, I thought you could manage it better. You know, he goes, no, Dad, don't do that because based on what I've read, this guy's an engineer, right? So he studies everything. You think lawyers study everything? Engineers are worse. I mean, he gets into everything, into the weeds and everything. He says, Dad, you don't know whether today some comic that you don't care about in 20 years might be worth a lot of money.
That's true. It's very true. Can't argue with that.
That's why it's so tough to sell comics.
Yeah. Anyway, so I think that was a pretty good discussion. I think I liked it. So we can go another, or we can end it here. What do you guys think?
I think this is probably a good place because we got to keep the people wanting more here.
Yeah. Because we're almost at $1.20, and that's kind of where we go anyway.
Yeah.
So listen, I want to thank everybody that showed up for our live stream. You know, and Doug says, this is how we become comic hoarders. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Very
right.
true.
And then some.
So I was going to say, no, the dynamic duo was not here. We got the right. So in any event, so I think we had a good discussion. I really appreciate everybody showing up for this, and we'll be back next month. We're already talking about some particular topics. I want to thank Pretty Fly for subbing for the dynamic duo.
Thank you. Yes.
It's
Good
actually
job.
not fair. I'm subbing for two people.
You're going to get double the pay.
Thank you.
That's the way it works around here. I don't fool around.
2 times 0.
Where are the sub fees?
All right, guys. So take care. Good night to everybody. We love you all, and we'll see you next month.